Welcome to this week's episode of the Highly Sensitive Club, my dear highly sensitive person. I wanted to give you a quick warning before you get into this episode that Jamie, my guest, and I discuss topics like depression, financial abuse, narcissism, and toxic relationship dynamics. If any of these things are triggering to you, then this might not be the episode for you. I recommend that you go to one of my earlier ones instead, or wait until next week to pick up on the next episode. Have you been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much? Do you have big feelings and deep thoughts you don't always know what to do with? I'm Stephanie Linn, a certified life coach and highly sensitive person. I've helped dozens of highly sensitive clients feel more energized, more confident, and more in control of their high sensitivity. In these episodes, you'll get the information and inspiration to level up your life as a highly sensitive person too. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Club. Hello, highly sensitive person, and welcome to this week's episode of the Highly Sensitive Club. Today, I have my new friend and colleague, Jamie Davis, on with me to talk about her experience with high sensitivity. Jamie, I'm going to pass it right off to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Well, thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you and connecting with you. I love when that kind of happens so organically. I am coaching around relationships and very specifically folks that find themselves in toxic relationships with any person that they know. A lot of it is intimate partner and highly narcissistic relationships. I am a lot of different things. I think I'm a mother most, and I have two older children. I've worked in healthcare, doing human resources and clinical research. And then I stepped out of the career world and I wanted to do something different. I had been in and out of therapy for many years, and I really liked therapy. I considered becoming a therapist. But when I heard about coaching and I understood the process of it, I felt like it was a real match for what I wanted to do. I'm a very curious person. It also is satisfying for me to see folks come to awareness over different things that they bring up. I realized that becoming aware is just the gateway to sustainable change. So I decided I was going to go into coaching. I also think I have advocacy in my DNA. I've always been an advocate to stand up for other people. I really knew right away that I was going to be a coach in a niche way. I was married for 25 years. It was a very high control marriage. It took me a long time to become aware of what I needed to do for myself, mainly because I was raising my children and I have a child with autism. My head was down trying to do all of that and thinking I was keeping that family together. There are, folks that after going through a lot of emotional and or psychological abuse really have lost their voice or it has shrunken and they lose their ability to self-validate. And so a validating community is very important, one with a shared vocabulary, because if you're gaslit for a long time, you're thinking you're the crazy one. It's highly normal. It's just, I want to normalize that for everybody. I found this niche and I knew that it was like sending a rope down a dark tunnel and helping that person see some light and continue on that journey.
Yes, especially because you're at the other end of the tunnel, you're in the light, and you know what's possible for them.
I am. And I still feel like I've got some aspects of darkness because of the fallout from my divorce. I've done a lot of therapeutic work. I think all humans need a space to put something out there and look at it. It's like the person is holding it for you and is turning it in all these different angles. You can see it more clearly, but it has to be held by another.
I completely agree, especially for highly sensitive people, as we tend to be overthinkers. We are picking up on other people's emotions. Many of us are rule followers, and we learn these rules from people who may not have our best interests at heart. And then we have to relearn with someone who can hold that space for us so that we can tap into that for ourselves. I'm curious, what was that like learning about the trait and how that shows up in your life?
It's really so helpful to be able to say, oh gosh, that's a thing. It's nothing that's wrong with me or broken inside of me. I'm not too sensitive. I'm not crazy. Those are all the things I heard growing up and in my marriage. And that was so relieving. I was the last of four girls in my family system of origin. And I was always the drama girl, right? I was always the one wanting the attention. Well, of course I wasn't. Nobody was very attentive. I learned that people pleasing was really important. What are your eyes telling me? What is your body language telling me? I was trying so hard not to feel shame or insecure. So I would use people as a mirror and look outward instead of looking inward. I discovered in therapy that there's something called highly sensitive people that absorb all of this information and sort through it as best they can to achieve something like belonging. When you can't have belonging in relationships that are important to you, it's incredibly isolating and disconnecting.
What kind of things happened where you felt like you couldn't fit in or you couldn't belong like you wanted to?
In my younger years, I liked being with my friends, but I also liked being alone a lot. And I felt good being alone. Like I wanted to watch things by myself. And we never even talked about words like introvert and extrovert back then. I remember being around my grandmother. I was staying with her, and my cousin wanted me to go to a party with him. And I said no. I just wanted to be at my cozy grandma's house. She looked at me and said, "Is something wrong with you?" Because I didn't want to go. So internalized that. The message was, I don't ever want to hear that again. Because now I kind of feel like my own grandmother thinks I'm strange. I've become very performative, and I was always hustling for my worth, trying to stay popular, trying to stay in the group. I remember coming home from school every day in middle school and walking down the hall towards my bedroom thinking, I survived another day, but I know tomorrow I might not fit in anymore. It was so scary for me. When you do that for a lot of years, you morph into a person you aren't, and it's uncomfortable.
What I heard you say, which is very common for highly sensitive people, is that you received messages from people who loved you in one way or another as much as they could,
Mhm.
that they didn't approve of the way you were behaving. So you developed the people pleaser mask, the persona. This was your coping mechanism in a culture and in a time where people didn't talk about things the way that they talk about them now. The term high sensitivity didn't even come about until 1996, let alone having conversations about introversion versus extroversion. And I think that's a really, really common story. And I bet that resonates with a lot of people.
I really wanted to please my parents, and my father wanted all of us girls to go to college. But more than that, he wanted us to get married because he thought we couldn't take care of ourselves, especially financially. Women in the society were not getting the professional opportunities and the economic opportunities that were afforded to men in the 1980s. He wasn't trying to, oppress us. He was trying to protect us. So I decided I really had to please a man. People pleasing became, I need to find a man that could take care of me. And I found one. They thought he'd be a good provider. He was white. He owned his own business. He was a Christian. It seemed to check all the boxes. I started not feeling like I belonged in that marriage very early on. It led to something called financial abuse, which a lot of people experience but don't really talk about. I had to give my paycheck to him. He would become very rageful if I spent money. For instance, when we got back from our honeymoon, there was $1,600 on the credit card from our wedding, and he was so angry, he picked up a kitchen chair and threw it across the room. And I thought, I never want to see this behavior again. So I shrunk. I got rid of that credit card, and he gave me money every week. That morphed into much more serious financial abuse through the years. And
How do you define financial abuse for those who don't know what that is?
it can take really diametrically different forms. It could be that someone is taking all of your money and refusing to work or pay for bills or things like that. It can be very high control of money. It can start out with, give me your paycheck. but then along the way saying, I won't give you money for this or for that. Being a highly sensitive person and someone who was also very codependent, I became the queen of workarounds because I didn't want anyone to be uncomfortable. I just wouldn't rock the boat. I would just find a way to work around it. I was really good at getting what I needed. When my son went to first grade, I started working again because I needed money. It was very clear that we're not going to have the money to pay for all the things my kids needed. There would be a lot of no's, and I didn't want that. So I ended up paying for all the groceries, all the things the kids needed, everything to run the household. Another form of financial abuse in my marriage was opening financial accounts in my name without me knowing it, never being included in tax conversations. I never signed a tax return. I never saw a tax return. But again, I thought he was just taking care of me, and my eyes were completely shut. We had owned 3 houses, and one was a farm in southern Ohio. We used to go there on the weekends when the kids were younger. And my mother was over. My ex-husband came in very angry at me because there was a credit card then, and I put prescriptions on it, but I had purchased a bathing suit for an upcoming trip. I caught so much hell from him. My mother saw it too. She didn't know the extent of a lot of it. Right after that, a truck came down our street and offloaded a brand new Porsche Carrera for him. The contrast of these things was just amazing. Then the financial abuse through a divorce with that kind of a person is really traumatic. He said, you can have this much, but you can't get an attorney. I started thinking, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. I don't even know our assets or liabilities. Then he coercively controlled my son into saying to me, if I didn't take that offer, he wouldn't be able to talk to me. The context of financial abuse is big. It can go from something smaller, but it usually morphs into something bigger.
I think if anyone who's listening is questioning what different forms could look like, it's very clear that it does show up in a lot of different ways. It seems to come down to an inequitable distribution of control or power over your shared finances.
Absolutely. It's you'll only find that in high control relationships.
When he would give you money for the week or for the month, what was the expectation that you would do with those?
Really just groceries. When my children were very small and they weren't in school yet, I would go to the grocery store with $100 for the week for 4 people. It was almost like playing the Price is Right in every aisle because I had no idea how much things were going to be at the end. And so I typically had to put groceries back, and it was really embarrassing. My kids were embarrassed. They didn't understand. I finally said I need a credit card when he would go out of town and leave. Like I needed to have some resources. So I finally did get a credit card, but it was highly monitored.
I also heard from your story, though, that you started in a place where you saw his behavior as trying to protect you and you trusted him and you just thought, this is just the way that this is. This is just the rules of the game. This is how marriage works.
Well, right. My dad was like, you guys can't do this stuff. You need a man to do it. And my ex-husband would say, I am smarter about this. You don't understand these things. So you just need to trust me. Sounds like a similar message that I've had all my growing up years. So yeah, I thought he was taking care of me.
When it was time to leave, tell us that part of the story, because that kind of transformation requires a lot of strength, resilience, and self-awareness.
I was absorbing so much anxiety and pain and fear that it was accumulating. At one point in my marriage, I had a major depressive episode, which was really frightening. My body kind of collapsed and broke down. I finally got back on track when I was going to counseling and I started using my voice more. I started saying no more and setting some boundaries, and that was not received well. We continued in marriage therapy. The other part of my story is there's real spiritual abuse too. He was from a very fundamentalist evangelical religion, and I was too. But I realized we didn't see things the same way, especially when Donald Trump came onto the scene. For me, that was a deal breaker. saw how he treated women. I saw how he talked about people with disabilities, and I was out. That was not okay in my marriage. I did not see that coming. My husband is also very homophobic, and I started to realize how out of alignment I was in my own values because of his values. It was increasingly uncomfortable. Like my husband said to me, "What are we doing in our marriage? I want a wife that agrees with me politically and theologically. This marriage is not sustainable for 20 plus years." I felt like it was the last Jenga piece that was pulled out, and I crashed to the ground. I became disassociated and left, but I didn't even know I was doing. It was so strange. I felt like I was watching from above, watching this woman that was walking out the door. That's where absorbing all of the stuff without getting out of a toxic environment is damaging. I would have preferred leaving with more of my head on straight and feeling like I was more powerful.
It almost sounds like being jarred out of your rules and your beliefs was what you needed, because up until that point, you were so resilient and so resourceful that you would have just found another workaround until you came to a breaking point where you just realized, oh, I can't work around this anymore. We've finally reached the point where this is no longer sustainable for me.
I'm so glad you said that. I hadn't looked at it that way, but you're right. I was out of workarounds. Yeah, I was done.
Sometimes we have to be faced with ourself on the deepest, lowest level in order to actually see it. I see this all the time, and I bet you do with your clients too, where we're unaware of the things that we're missing about ourselves because we're so used to seeing the world a certain way. Even though it's so painful, sometimes it's the best thing that could possibly happen to us because it gets us out of those patterns and those habits.
Yep, that's very true. It's that wake up, right? All of a sudden you realize, what am I doing? The therapist, like, going backwards means going back in that little box, and you'll have to do that if you're going to stay. So I marched forward, and I've been marching ever since. Not perfectly, for sure, but definitely moving forward. That's been great. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I'm so glad you advocated for yourself and getting help, because having a counselor who could support you through that healing process and help you see things more objectively is so important.
The other thing I really explored is my need to make everything good for people, like make it all feel good. When I would do that, I was not only inhibiting their growth, but I was really hurting myself. I really had to learn to stand in my power as a highly sensitive person and set those boundaries. I think when you're highly sensitive and you are doing everything you can to make other people's problems go away and make them feel good and comfortable, you are not using your empathy for its highest good. You're not using your sensitivity for its highest good. I've learned to protect that by setting more boundaries. It certainly doesn't just happen. It's every situation, one at a time.
I had this very conversation today with one of my highly sensitive clients about this desire to fix when other people are uncomfortable or when they're feeling quote unquote negative emotions. So I love, love, love what you said about using your empathy for the highest good. Trying to fix or make everybody calm and smooth is not necessarily in the highest good. How do you see using your empathy for the highest good?
It's really situation by situation, but becoming aware of it was really the beginning. Then getting curious. You've got to build in a pause, because I was jumping in to save them, to rescue them, to do things that they didn't have to have consequences for all of the time. I had to develop a pause so I didn't jump. I mean, I would even train my body to just be still. And if I had to say something to that person, I'd say, I need to make the right decision, not the quickest decision. So I'll get back to you in a little bit. That pause led me then to be curious with myself. It's one thing to be curious with others, but you can do that internally, right? You can ask yourself powerful questions. What is my motive here? What information am I not seeing? What's another perspective? Are these consequences that should be felt? You start asking questions. And once you ask questions of yourself And sometimes I, would kind of toss it out there to someone else. You can be more thoughtful about your responses. That's helped me. Even the other day, my daughter was supposed to go with me to pick up her car somewhere. And 11 o'clock was the only time I had, and she wasn't here. The old me would have called, would have changed the time, would have changed other things. I sat down and I thought, no, these are perfectly natural consequences that she should experience. And she's going to be uncomfortable because she didn't meet this deadline. And I did that. But that's not natural for me. I want to please and help everyone. She's not doing it to take advantage of me, but she certainly is used to me doing this. I've established the patterns. So developing a pause is hard. I can get up on a drone level and see myself down here and say, okay, this is your moment to step carefully.
Love that story because it's a lesson in how you want to show up to the world and the way that you give yourself permission, because then you literally went and did it. I heard you say, and this is so interesting, using your empathy to try to fix people is not using it in its highest good. But from moment to moment, the highest good is something that you choose out of your values, out of your intentions and your integrity. And I love your 3-step process, which is to pause, to become aware, and then to get curious. That is how you use your empathy to your best interest, but also for the other person's best interest, because you get to choose intentionally how to proceed and to respond rather than react.
Exactly. That's also language I love, is the respond rather than react. I wrote a blog about highly sensitive people, and I called it I See Dead People. That is based on the 1999 movie The Sixth Sense. This young boy had the supernatural ability to see dead people who were coming to him because they had some unresolved issues in their life on Earth. That's kind of how I view highly sensitive people. You are seeing things that other people aren't seeing. I have another story that happened recently where I know someone from where I work out, and I don't know her too well, but we had lunch once or twice. The other day, she texted me and asked about lunch. And there was something about the way she was writing. I could just tell she needed to do it quickly. I said, do you want to meet tomorrow? And she's like, yes, tomorrow. And, it was when I showed up, she started sobbing. It was almost as if I knew that was coming. I think highly sensitive people pick up on those things. But there's a kryptonite to that. The kryptonite can be the fact that you tell yourself a lot of emotional stories that aren't true and cause yourself pain and shame. That's not for the highest good.
I'm so curious now, what does life look like for you after the divorce, being independent, being able to call the shots for yourself and really live your neurospicy, highly sensitive life?
It's been, 7.5 years. At first, I didn't know how to operate. I'd have to call my sister to say, can I buy this? It was a process of living into my own life and how I wanted to do things. I remember a turning point for me was my daughter started going to Pilates, and she went to an introduction class. And then she came home, and I could tell something was going on with her. We sat down, and she said, I'm really afraid that I'm going to embarrass myself in a class. I looked at her and I said, you know what? I can pay for you to do private classes for a while. I can do that. It was such a turning point for me because I thought, how lucky am I to be able to afford private classes for her when all she used to hear was no. It opened up this feeling of, I got this and I can use this for its highest good. It became easier after that. It's one decision at a time. I also talk about my team. I kind of imagine that I have a bench behind me and I have a team there, and I call them up when I need them. I've chosen those people very carefully. And I feel like I'm on people's team now, my clients certainly. And we all need that.
I'm so curious now, who's on the bench? Who is your team? And how do you show up as a team member for your clients?
I will always look at my bench and see my two sisters there. They've also gone through very hard things. My divorce attorney was always on my team, and she still is because I refer people to her. and we talk, and she's referred people to me. My therapist is on my team, certainly. My financial advisor is on my team. I have a trust attorney. I had a property manager on my team because I got some properties and I had no idea what I was doing. I needed a good person to come alongside of me. I've got a couple friends where they would show up for me in any situation. Certainly show up for my clients in a very non-opinionated, non-judgmental, non-advisory way. I show up in a very empathic, curious, understanding way. It's really about building that safety for them because a lot of people have never experienced that, and that can take a while. I get permission from them if I want to go in a different direction or if they want to stay on with the topic that they brought up. I also try to respond when they really need some instant validation. It's so individual because I never say you should get out of this relationship. That's not my call. A lot of people want some tools to be able to preserve themselves during the relationship. Some people cut them out forever. There's other people that just really want to learn some skills and understand what's going on. It's really individual. It's just about getting curious. They have another piece of information, excuse me, that informs how they want to move forward. I remind them of our past sessions and how far they've come and how much they've become aware of. You see these light bulb moments, and those are helpful times.
I just want to sum this up because I think it's really powerful. After your divorce, you had a moment where the gears were going in one direction and you had to stop them so they could go in the other direction. That's very common in change. You have built the ability to trust your own inner voice. You make decisions more easily now without having a lot of the mind drama. And you're an advocate for yourself. You ask for help when you need it, but you also lean into the resources that you have within you that you continue to grow and cultivate.
That's a great summing up.
You have all of those internal resources, then you're helping your clients do the same thing, tap into their internal resources. Whether they stay, whether they go, whether they make whatever decisions they're going to make for themselves, that process of patiently being with someone is so often enough that they start to treat themselves with that same kind of compassion. You've taught them simply by being there.
That's right. They start to learn how to trust themselves because they've been in something where they've lost the ability to do that. Sometimes it's me directing them to another kind of process like EMDR therapy for trauma. I know where my lane is. And I know when I need to say, can I get you some resources? Sometimes you need someone just to kind of help you get upright again. And it might not take that long, but it's important to have those resources.
You're anchoring them into a grounded reality in which they are capable and they can figure it out and they will make it happen, whatever that looks like.
That's right. Absolutely.
What's one final thought you would like to leave us with before we hop off today?
Now, final thought would be become vulnerable with one person that you really trust. If you have a safe person and you're vulnerable, you're opening a door to something else. If this resonates with anyone that wants to reach out to me, I would certainly welcome that. I have a website called Stop the Spin Cycle. They can contact me through that. There's a lot of resources.
I'll include that information in the show notes too. So you can just click on the link right in the show notes.
That's great. Well, as usual, it's been great talking with you.
It's been a pleasure. I love talking to you. Someone needed to hear this today, and they are going to get a ton out of this episode, your story, and these beautiful moments of coming into yourself in these small moments and then applying it to the rest of your life, and then helping your clients do that too. This is really powerful stuff.
Thank you for saying that. It's felt really good to share it.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to take what you learned today to the next level, head over to Stephanie Linn, that's LINN.com, and book a consultation call to get started. I can't wait to see you there, my dear HSP.